There's often a kind of tension that exists between direct response and mid-level programs. I sometimes hear stories about one department or the other getting territorial about their donors or receiving credit for their gifts, but it doesn't have to be this way. For this episode, I've invited two special guests to join me for a conversation about how mid-level and direct response can work together to make the most of everyone's time and resources, while fostering stronger connections with donors at every stage of giving. And we'll talk to you about how you can create this kind of collaboration at your organization. Thanks for tuning in, and I'm glad you're here.
Welcome to the Nothing But Major Gifts podcast from Veritas Group, featuring Richard Perry and Jeff Schreifels. Twice a month, we bring you the latest and best thinking about major gift fundraising, so you can develop authentic relationships with your major donors. Here are your hosts, Richard and Jeff.
Welcome to the podcast today. I'm Jeff Schreifels, and today I've got two special guests to join our conversation around how mid-level and direct response can work together. As we know, mid-level is a rather new fundraising strategy, especially compared to the lengthy history of direct response fundraising. And having a relational mid-level fundraising approach is even newer to most nonprofits. Generally, when I talk to fundraisers and nonprofit leaders, their experience with mid-level is through the high-touch direct mail campaign. And while this has a lot of value, it's different from a relational approach to mid-level, although direct response still plays a critical role in that relational strategy. To discuss all of this, I'm thrilled to have Kara Ansotagi, Senior Director, Leadership Giving at ACS, and Becca Burgess, Vice President of Client Services at Moore, on the podcast today. Welcome, Kara and Becca.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Great to be with you today. As you know, I was a Veritas client for the mid-level program that I built years ago, worked with Veritas for a few years as well, and really love implementing so many of the Veritas tactics and techniques now that I'm at the American Cancer Society. I'm so thrilled to be here today.
Great. Becca, why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've been in the fundraising world and marketing world for about 15 years. I've had the opportunity to be on the client side for a little bit and then moved over to the dark side of the agency world about 7 years ago. And since then, I've had the privilege of working with many nonprofits from, smaller, mid-size to large.
Yes.
And there's just so much going on with mid-level right now, considering the environment and how fundraising is changing post-COVID. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic today. It's near and dear to my heart.
All right, awesome. All right, so to kick things off, I just want to talk a bit more about the different approaches you can have with mid-level and what a relational approach to mid-level looks like. Kara, why don't you share a bit more about that?
I would be happy to. So, I think a lot of organizations think about mid-level, Jeff, and they think about solely a high-touch direct response program. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's wonderful. We recommend it, right?
Yeah.
But in addition to that, when we think about a relational mid-level program, we think about almost like major gifts, right? It's very personal, but it's one to some versus one to one. That's really how we view the relational side of mid-level with that program.
Yeah.
They have dedicated mid-level officers, caseloads that are tiered, just like in major gifts, but they're in the 500 to 700 range. We really find a sweet spot, usually for most organizations, around 600. We build personalized personalized communication plans. We tier those donors, like I mentioned earlier, based on gift size and cumulative giving over the years. And then we do that as a layer on to direct response, right? It's an add-on to what they're already getting from the direct response program.
Yeah. So direct response plays a big role in any mid-level strategy. What are some of the creative ways you've seen organizations create a partnership between direct response and mid-level, Becca?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to talk about how organizations are starting to think differently about mid-level. So, maybe a couple of years ago, it was really just their variations of packages that you would give to regular dollar donors. They would have some sort of, feel of value to it. Maybe we would talk a little bit more about impact. But the way the landscape has changed with fundraising, we're seeing that the value of donors is starting to creep up. Part of that has to do with lower dollar donors falling off the file. Part of that just has to do with people giving more.
Yeah.
And so in order for organizations to continue to grow, they have to look at those higher value donors. And so the way we handle direct mail for those folks has changed. We're looking more at cultivation pieces. We're really going deep into the investment of their dollars into programs and how that is helping solve major problems. And so that is kind of how it's all shifting and changing. And there's a lot of obstacles that are coming about because of that change. When you have a shift in the way you think about something, the organization as a whole has to shift, not just the fundraisers. And so, you have to be able to start at the top and have everyone in leadership start to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. That way you can begin the direct mail portion of it and then go into what Kara is talking about for the relationship management.
Yeah. Good points.
So
Kara?
great. Well, I loved so many things that Becca just said, but I was just at a conference for mid-level with my two direct response colleagues that oversee the mid-level program of direct response at ACS. And it's incredible what a unique partnership we have with them that most organizations don't have. But there's really no fighting over credit, which is one of the biggest issues that, Jeff, we would see this all the time with clients. Well, I can't give you those donors and I'm not going to get credit for those donors. It's really not like that. We've put some parameters in place and that helps, right? So if it's an acquisition, obviously they're going to get credit for that donor. If we have reached out to them, but we haven't reached out to them at least 3 times in the last 4 months, direct response is still getting the credit because we can't really credit our relationship with them that way. So what we've seen is these parameters kind of help us know who's doing what, but organizationally, we're looking at the donors as donors to the organization, not direct response versus relational. Our program, Leadership Annual Giving, starts at 1,000. We go to 9,999, so just under 10,000. And mid-level through direct response really is typically about 500 to 999. So they're our pipeline. They see us as a pipeline. And they see themselves, I should say, as a pipeline. So they really see the value of our partnership together. And we've really started doing some different tactics to see, hey, if direct response sends out an appeal that we would have sent out at year end a little early, will we get money in the door earlier? So it's just this beautiful partnership that is so valuable and important that I think more organizations really need to focus on.
Okay. You have said so many valuable things right now. We're seeing a lot of issues with some of that because people are talking about attribution. Everybody wants the piece of their pie and, this goes to my budget. And if I don't raise this much money, I'm not going to get this much to spend next year. And with the way fundraising is, attribution is not the same as what it once was. And so you can't quite do it by channel anymore. You have to really look at all of it, evaluate all of it by audience. And that's the same with your mid-level audience. And if we're fighting over dollars rather than working together in partnership with all of the other departments within the organization, you're going to leave dollars on the table. And again, that starts at the very, very top, the people that are building the budgets and holding others accountable for what they're raising.
Yeah.
So true.
I'm wondering, okay, so you've identified there's some barriers out there that have prevented people from playing nice. So Kara, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you've done at ACS to kind of overcome some of those barriers what have you been doing to promote working together in that partnership so that other nonprofits that are watching this can like have some real practical ideas?
I think in some ways I'm really fortunate because um, a lot of this started before I got there. But let me back up to say it started before I got there because we have 16 leadership annual giving officers, right? We have a big team.
Yeah.
We're raising this year probably just under $8 million. So it's value to the organization. And the leadership in fundraising saw the value to the organization.
Mm.
And, it's Becca's point, it's a top down kind of approach. I would say since I've gotten there, it's partnering and it's stewardship of our teammates, right? We talk all the time about stewarding our donors, but we have to steward our partners and think about how it works both ways. Yeah, there are pipeline, but when I have good things that they can use in their stream that can be beneficial for them, it's my job to do that as well, right? So
Yeah.
I just feel like we have this really beautiful partnership now that allows us to think holistically at putting our donors at the center of it and not fighting over who's getting credit. And
Yeah.
it's not always easy. I mean, it really isn't. And I know that.
Yeah. Becca, do you have some strategies for folks like how they can show that financial performance without having these issues around crediting?
Yeah, sure. So we like to do both bottom up and top down budgeting. So the
Okay.
bottom up is traditional. You're looking at it by campaign and response and average gift and all of that. But the top down really looks at life cycles and the capacity of your file.
Mhm.
And that's really how we're taking the approach now, so that when we're working with organizations, we could say, oh yeah, you have the bottom up for us to have basically like a gauge of how things are moving, but you can't always just assume that all of these exact dollars are going to come in through your direct mail program. They may be coming in through digital, but that doesn't mean that the touch points in direct mail aren't valuable. And so what we do then is we have that pulse on, what's coming in from all of the campaigns across direct response, but then we are also evaluating the life cycles of the
Yes.
donors at least once a quarter to see where those KPIs are landing. And that'll help us determine whether or not we truly are meeting where we should be. Because even if the dollars are coming in, if they're not coming in from the right places, your file isn't working the way it should. So that's one of the techniques we use with our clients to help them see what's working and what's not working, and not to fight over dollars at the campaign level.
That's
It's
a great
so,
point.
oh,
Yeah.
so sorry, Jeff. Go
Oh,
ahead.
well, I mean, yeah, because in the direct response world, all those, the appeals, the email, whatever, you're tracking every one of those. What's you know, how did those individual tactics perform, right?
Right.
And if that's all you're tracking, then you'll get very territorial because if you see
Right.
donors moving away, that's going to reduce the performance of those individual appeals.
Yeah, and it's not even accurate anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
we've moved into this omni-channel approach, and without the surround sound, your response overall is not going to be as high. And if you attribute it to, an email or a direct mail piece, or some sort of digital ad, and you put that up against, return on investment, it's not accurate. And if you're only evaluating your programs based on that, you're going to be missing out.
Yeah.
So it's funny or ironic, I should say, when we attended this event, they asked all these questions in advance so they could put you in breakout sessions, right? And one of the questions was about your program size. Well, they answered it when my colleagues in direct response answered it from their program size. And they put us in the small group, like the smallest fundraising group. And we all chuckled, but it's because when they look at their not their budget, but their number, it is really truly this small from what they're counting, but it's this big when you encompass all the credit they're not getting, right? The number that they're mailing to is very different than the revenue that they're counting in the program. So
Mhm.
it's really not indicative of the work that we're doing across the organization.
Yeah.
And if you're going to start, here would be my advice. If you're going to start this mid-level program, you have to figure out first how you're going to measure it, because if you can't measure it, you can't move it. And so that all the parameters, I think, Carrie, you talked about in the beginning of how you're figuring that out, that needs to be figured out up front. Because if not, you guys are just going to be fighting over dollars, and somebody's going to ask you, well, can you prove to me that this program is working?
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, yeah.
Yeah, Karen and I, we were talking about this the other day on what do you measure? And so for us, our big measurements are retention rates. Usually mid-level donors already have fairly high retention rate. We want to see those maintain or increase a bit. And then the revenue per donor increasing as well, which takes into account average gift and number of gifts per year. And then
Yep.
our final one is what percent of those mid-level donors are moving into major gifts every year? Those are
Yeah.
the three big ones.
Those are really good. I would add in for those organizations that are just starting, say you're putting together your mid-level program and you're just starting to add maybe cultivation pieces and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What we found was for an organization we work with, and we did just that. We added 3 cultivation pieces into the mid-level approach, and the KPI that showed us that it was working was that the number of $1,000 plus gifts doubled. So it
Mhm.
wasn't just the average gift we were looking at creeping up, it was actually those gifts over that amount.
Mhm.
So that told us right off the bat the program was working and that we can keep moving in that direction.
I love that.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so we know that mid-level and creating a strong partnership with direct response is so important to the organization's success. Becca, what are some of the things you're hearing from clients in the market about the importance of this and how to approach it when your organizations may have limited staff or resources?
Yeah, I mean, these are the conversations that we're having with our clients quite often as we're looking at the capacity of their file and the trends within fundraising over the last couple of years. I can't stress enough that in order for organizations to grow, they have to find value within their current file.
Yeah.
And so, like it or not, you're going to have to figure out how to invest in that particular strategy. And we've built strategies for our clients that, we're from the infancy stages of it to a bit more of a sophisticated program leading into relationship fundraising and how that works together. And we put in, here is the dream of what we want it to look like.
Mhm.
Here's how we're going to step into it over the next 3 to 5 years. And that's just how you get them started. And you have to get, your day-to-day contacts that live and breathe fundraising, as well as their top leadership excited about doing this and the why behind it. We talked about pipelines. This is the pipeline.
Yeah. And I would add to that, Jeff, if you have really limited resources, think about starting, maybe you have a joint, a dual role, right? You have a few mid-level, your top mid-level that you want to really focus on to move to major gifts, but you're doing something else. Let direct response be your best friend. Figure out what pieces you can put lift notes on. Figure out what pieces can have variable print and come from you. So this is something new we're doing this year with our direct mail team in mid-level. Every piece that has a contact information on it is their relationship manager's name and number. There's going to be a couple asks this year that are going to be signed and have the name and number from their relationship coordinator. And then we've got a lift note on a couple of them like, hey, check out this stewardship piece. They're genuine stewardship pieces, right? Most direct response programs are going to have a couple genuine stewardship pieces. Get a name and a number on those in case people want more information. There is so much you can do that doesn't cost a lot that can really add in that partnership and work to increase those donors, and do some testing. Test some increased asks with those lift notes. See if that's making a difference, right? There's things you can do without a lot of resources.
Yeah, I would add to that too, some people are probably asking, well, how do you determine which ones to do that with and which ones not?
Mhm.
And there are propensity models out there that are being built to show who in your file was not giving mid-level at this point, has the propensity and past behavior to give. Are
Mhm.
they doing it? Are they giving in that level to other organizations like yours? You know, do they have the ability to give that amount of money? And then also for the asks, I would add that what we've learned for mid-level is you don't want to box people in.
Mhm.
So you would typically start with some sort of priming number, you know, prime that brain to focus on whatever number it is. Say it's $300, $500, whatever. It can be based off of their HPC, you can, a number of different things. But then you leave it open. Don't box them into, you know, the smallest gift here and the largest gift here. Just open, you know,
Yeah.
first number and then leave it open. We've done that test multiple times and we see that the response rates goes up along with the average gift. So
You know, I had a client that did that, Becca. We did, this was when I was with Veritas. We didn't even do one ask. It just said, would you be willing to consider your highest and best gift to date? And it performed really well.
yeah,
Interesting. Good stuff. So, what do you say to someone who's listening, going, I know we need to do this. It just seems so overwhelming. I'm just wondering, Kara, where do you start?
I would start by getting some bi-weekly meetings on the calendar with your direct response team. Ask them to share their calendar with you, right? Ask them to share examples of those pieces they've done last year. They're probably going to be similar pieces year over year. Look at those and put yourself in the donor's shoes of what's going to feel best from the donor to receiving that, and where you could do those lift notes, where you could do I've had some clients have the stewardship pieces mailed to them and they've sent them out themselves with a personalized note, right? That's where I would start. Build the relationship, understand what your partners are doing, and figure out how you can start to layer on to that if you don't have any other resources at the time.
Yeah. Becca, how about you? Any other advice?
yeah. I mean, the approach I was talking about before is dream big, build it out, and then step back into it like the tiniest steps at a time. To Kara's point too, an easy way to start is taking a look at your Marcom and understanding what's already going out and seeing what you could add to it. Very
Absolutely.
simple ads. It doesn't even have to cost any money. You can just simple changes in copy or, you know, very simple things. If
Yeah.
that's, if you have nothing, start there.
I
What if you don't
agree.
have full-time staff? How do you engage, like volunteers and students and stuff?
Oh my gosh. I will tell you, when I worked in the university setting, we would have students in advance prep holiday cards and thank you cards, and then we just would mail them out. It is so easy to do that. I've worked in the settings where we would send a weekly $1,000 plus
Yeah.
list to our board members, or I would send a $10,000 plus list to my board chair, and they would take care of it from there. I mean, it doesn't, as long as you can work with your database partners to get those lists out of the system, and you can work with your volunteers on your expectations and some draft language so you know what that's going out is what you want it to be, it's a pretty easy lift.
That's exactly right. You remind me of, I used to work at Canines for Warriors, and on Thursdays we would have Thank You Thursdays, and we'd have a number of volunteers come in, and we would give them lists of donors to call, and they would call them, and they would talk to them or leave them messages. They
Yeah.
would, you know, write their notes in the spreadsheets that we gave them, and then we could very easily import it
Yep.
into the, you know, the CRM. It just goes a long way. And there's other simple things like we were able to, you know, print out pictures of the Warriors and their dogs, and, you know, the president would sign it and we would send it for anyone over $500 or $1,000, whatever it was. But they loved it. And it was, you know, it was very high touch, and they would call and then they would sit and talk to, you know, one of the staff about their donation and what more they can do. So
Awesome. Awesome stuff. Kara and Becca, thanks for joining me today. I think you got some great tips out to our audience and, for how to really create a successful and a productive partnership between direct response and mid-level as well. And if you'd like to get important support for yourself or your team with direct response strategy, we highly recommend reaching out to More to discuss that further. And if you're looking for coaching and expert training on creating a relational mid-level fundraising program, we'd love to chat. Head to the show notes to get the conversation started, or send my colleague Amy an email at achapman@veritasgroup.com.
Thank you for joining us for the Nothing But Major Gifts podcast from Veritas Group. Richard and Jeff also write an ongoing blog that you can subscribe to for free at veritasgroup.com. Please join us again next time.